not having a plan makes you not consistent, because it means that anything goes. Consistency is doing what you should do, even though you don't want to do it, until it becomes a habit.
Welcome to Christ Mosaic, where we discuss living a life of faith in today's society. My name is Diana Dori, and my lovely co-host,
Karaoke Juma.
Asanteni, for joining us today. And Karaoke, today we are on episode 3. Imagine, episode 3.
We have moved.
Yani, okay. Anyway, it's really a privilege to even having reached here. At least haijakufa,
Yes.
you know.
Yes.
But we're going to still continue. And today we're going to talk about sourcing. Plugging into the source, part 3.
Yes.
We're continuing with this. We must plug into this source.
Plug into the source.
Yeah. And so we have a special guest. But before we introduce her, what's our intention today?
So the intention of this podcast is that we may understand that how to live a life of devotion. That living a life of devotion takes commitment. It takes love, and it really means that we have to dig within ourselves and act in accordance to the will of the Lord.
Nice. And being that yesterday was Happy International Women's Day,
Yes.
and we're having a lovely woman with us, a woman of God. But then, you know, she taught me when I was in my teenage years. I think everyone.
Mimi hapa alinifunza tukiwa ropes.
Tukiwa ropes.
Tukiwa ropes.
Mimi sasa kwa ropes, hapo ndo I've never done ropes. So hapo tu pekee ndo hapo nifunza. And some people here wameona tangu baby class. If I'm not wrong. And so we have somebody here, Miriam, karibu.
Thank you, Diana. And
Happy
thank you,
belated
Karaoke.
Women's Day.
Thank you.
At least today I have another woman who can support me. You know, when we were shooting for Jeff, I was just the only one. But Happy International Women's Day. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Can you introduce yourself to our our audience? Who you are, what do you do, and who is Miriam?
Okay. Thank you for having me. My name is Miriam Wangeshi. I am a born-again Christian. I gave my life to Christ many years ago in high school, and it's been an interesting faith journey that God has taken me through. I am a wife and a mom to 2 wonderful boys who are 3 and 5, and I practice HR in the church. So I work at Kileleshwa Covenant Community Church, and more to that, I also serve at Kileleshwa Covenant Community Church on the worship team.
Nice.
Yeah.
Hey, Kumbe, you're a very resourceful woman. You see what I've done there? Being a human resource, very resourceful.
I tell you.
No, sina story mingi. Today sina story, sina kama ya Saimo. But in life, we always, if you want to succeed in life, you always have to be consistent in everything that you do. So what are some of the ways, Karaoke, you've been consistent before we dive into our topic?
I have been consistent in going to school.
So there was some point where you were not consistent.
Hapo is an ex parte conversation, but I have been consistent in going to school. You know, we went to school in primary, we've gone to school in high school, and now we are in college and uni, and that is where we are, and we continue the consistency. So there's the hunger for knowledge. That is where I have been consistent.
Oh, nice. So even us right now, we're hungry for this knowledge. And today we're talking about consistency in our devotion to God. And so what does it, Miriam, what does it look like to be consistent in our devotion to God?
Wow, I love that Karaoke used the example of school because I came across a very interesting definition of consistency. And it says that consistency is doing what you should do, even though you don't want to do it, until it becomes a habit.
Well, just
so doing
it for the backbenchers, you know,
doing what you should do. So doing the necessary thing, even though you don't want to do it, until it becomes a habit.
Wow.
And I found that to be very interesting because when you talk about school, well, school sometimes it's not always fun. You know, waking up early in the morning. If you went to boarding school like myself, you have to have an very early morning, probably 4 a.m. or 5 a.m., you know, probably be in class by 5:45, before 6. That's not fun. You know, consistently over 4 years, it just feels you can't wait to get done.
Yeah.
But you do it because it's necessary. So I found that to be a very interesting definition of consistency. And as you talk about being consistent in our walk with God, I like what Maureen shared in the previous episode. And she said that devotion is from a space of love.
Yeah.
And when I thought about consistency, I was reminded of the verse in Revelation chapter 2 that talks about, John speaking to the church in Ephesus and saying, return to your first love, that God was holding something against the church in Ephesus and telling them, return to your first love. And so just that aspect of, commitment and devotion, being from a space of love, I found that to be very interesting. And also just hearing Maureen talk about that for me was really profound. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yes. So, over the course of the series, we have talked about devotion. We have talked about plugging into the source. We established that this source is the Lord. There is no other source like it.
Yeah.
We talked about devotion, and we said devotion comes from a place of love. It is being enthusiastic about God. It is being loyal to God and saying, I'm trusting you, not the works of men, but you. And then we also talked about the source. We said the source, he is I am. Maureen said, I am that I am. He's who you want him to be at that particular time. We also realized that the source gives you power. It gives you the ability to do the things that you could not do before. So could you maybe explain to us and thread for us the link between devotion and this source that we're calling God?
I would say that consistency, just a few thoughts that I had even as I thought about this topic of consistency, is that consistency, first of all, has to begin from the heart and your mind. When Jesus says, the greatest of these commandments, he was speaking to his disciples and saying, sort of summarizing the commandments and saying that, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your might. When it comes to the heart is the seat of our passions. What are you passionate about? And so basically saying that I should be passionate about my love for God, that it really should come from it's the one thing that drives me, that my love for God and my pursuit of being consistent in my devotion from God to God is from a space of love. That's what I'm passionate about. That's what I'm pursuing. Because when you're passionate about something, that's what you pursue. And Maureen talked about, when she talked about, being devoted to pets, to a sport, to exercising, because you're passionate about it, so you pursue it, and so you do everything you can to ensure that it's part of what you're doing every day. You spend money on it, you spend time on it, and so when it comes to being consistent, and looking about consistency in our relationship with God, in our devotion to God, then I should pursue it. That my passion drives me. My love for God drives me to be consistent, and so I spend time. I sacrifice. I spend money, to do those things that get me in a space where I am spending time with God, or I'm being devoted to God in one way or another, depending on the activities that you do that, get you to a space where you're connected with God. Yeah.
Nice. So me, I'm doing my master's currently, and let me tell you, I don't know if I'm very passionate or I should stay consistent with it. Like the way karaoke, you're consistent with your school, because when you enter a new space, you think you can do it. You come with fire, but the fire died down a little bit early. But I hope I'll stay consistent with it, just like staying consistent with God. But consistency is just, okay, let's say like devotion. It's more than just reading the word, going to church. There is a way you're supposed to live a life that is devoted to God. So in our daily lives, like with your spouse, with your relationships, with your family, how then have you stayed consistent in devotion to God in those aspects of your lives? And how can we as well stay consistent? Like if I'm in school right now, how can I be devoted in my schoolwork? How does that work?
Well, I think it would be good to mention that, as we talked about, consistency being from a place of love and devotion being from in a space of love, that it being love in action doesn't mean it's easy. It's not easy. It's not. Remember what we said, that consistency is doing what you should do, even when you don't want to do it, until it becomes a habit. And so consistency means that I have to continuously do a personal audit of what is driving me. What are my passions? What have I been passionate about? What has taken the place of God in a particular season? Because we often, when we think about idolatry, we think a being or something that you've created, a statue. But the reality of life is that the business of life can actually be an idol, and get into a season. The reality of life is that when you get into a season, it means that you have to adjust. You have to make some certain changes. And so it means that even as I make those certain changes, because God has led me into a different season. So, for example, when I got married, for example, that was a different season. It means that I don't have the whole time to myself. I need to create time for myself, create time for my spouse, but most importantly, create time for God. And so I have to ask myself, am I, just do an honest audit of myself. Have I actually allowed the wifing and the homemaking to take over, the responsibilities to take over that time. And so when I do that personal audit and do it honestly, then I can say I haven't quite made time. Because the reality about consistency is you cannot be consistent when you have not planned.
Wow.
Not having a plan will not having a plan makes you not consistent, because it means that anything goes, and so even as we think about the different seasons, when children come, it's a whole different ball game. When you get a child, you're probably going to spend the next 1 month awake, awake. And so what I discovered, I think at the time, like I remember when I got our firstborn, many times I would really spend a lot of time in the night, when the baby wakes up in the night, and I'm scrolling through social media. And then I realized it's not adding value to me. And it took somebody to post and say that at that time, what they did is, rather than go on social media, as they were taking care of the baby, as they were breastfeeding the baby in the night and taking care of the baby in the night, they would take the Bible and read and have time with God. Because the reality of time with God is, it's what is your focus? What is your focus in that moment? Because your mind starts wandering. It starts wandering, and you're thinking, oh, I haven't done the dishes. Oh, tomorrow I need to do the laundry. There are so many things that are competing for your attention. But that moment with God is when I say that I'm taking care of this baby, yes, but my mind is focused on spending this time with God and being devoted, quote unquote, to this particular time with God, so that I can hear what He's saying to me, even in this season, even in the difficulty of adjusting to motherhood. When it comes to work, for example, I think of just simple moments when I've had time to step back and say, God, this task that I have been given by my boss is a difficult task. Lord, lead me to to the right person, lead me to the right supplier, and when you see God in action and Him responding to your prayers, that motivates you. It's a greater motivation than this sermon that you hear and you're like, yay, all pumped up, and I'm gonna do my devotion now, I'm gonna pray more. But when you see God in action and responding to your time in prayer, then it keeps you motivated and keeps you going. Because one of the realities of consistency is, you need to realize that when you spend time with God, have an expectant heart. What does an expectant heart mean? It means that I go to God expecting that He will not only listen to me, but He will respond. And so that keeps me motivated to keep going back, keep going back and keep spending time with God, because I can see the fruit. I can actually see the realities of that time with God and what that means for me. And I can see it working in my space and in my season, and then that's why you get the whole aspect of testimonies and people sharing, God did this for me. But that is only found from a place of being consistent and continuously doing it over and over again, even when I don't feel like it.
I love two things before we go to the next one, two things you've pointed out. One is planning. I think there's a quote says that if you don't plan, you plan to fail. And so even in your devotion, of course, if you're not planning or sticking to it's not a must to be religious in today, at this time, at this hour, at this, no. It's just planning your day and putting a certain time apart. And also that it builds intimacy with God during your time when you're consistent. Over time, and then the results is fruits. You'll always see fruits, and I really do like that.
So we have talked about that. You have shared about the different aspects of the different areas in our lives: work, school, as a parent, as a spouse. as a child, how we can be able to continually and consistently seek the Lord. I am there, I'm listening, and I need to plan. I need to take time back and do audits. I need to audit myself.
Yeah.
Where does this actually start from? Like, where do I begin? Pastor Jeff previously mentioned, buy a Bible, buy a pen, and buy a notebook.
Yeah.
So when I'm auditing myself, what does this really look like? Like, do I have to really write down? Like, kama ni kuandika, as in, you know, in my notebook, I'm writing down, this is what I do in my day-to-day. This is what I would like it to look. So how does that self-audit maybe look like as we begin? How does the auditing myself look like?
Well, I think auditing yourself is being honest with yourself, you know, and realizing that coming to a space where you actually acknowledge that you have not been doing well, you know, or I'm not doing well in either it's reading the word or spending time in prayer, or just, you know, engaging in the spiritual disciplines, yeah? And I think it needs to be met with an aspect of grace to yourself, because the reality is when it now changes and now it now becomes sort of like a ritual, it becomes something that you cannot sustain.
Yeah.
And so it's recognizing and acknowledging that, one, I am lacking in this area. This is the area I want to grow in. So acknowledging that I'm not doing well in this particular area and I want to do better. Yeah, I want to do better. I will give an example of, I think 3 years ago, when I really wanted to grow in the area of spending time with God, and just in the aspect of consistently spending time every day with God, so journaling and prayer. And so this lady just shared a post. It's an acquaintance, yeah? And so she said, you know, I'm looking for a group of ladies who would want to grow in their prayer life in the next year. And one of the things that did for me, because you're in a group of many ladies across the world, and what we would do every day is that a post would be sent out by the leader of the group, and what you were meant to do, one, was that you were to ensure that you have spent at least 15 minutes reading the word and in prayer. So 15 minutes of the word and 15 minutes in prayer, and then more to that is that you would journal. And so what that did for me is that it created an aspect of consistency, because at the end of the day, you had to post what you have learned on the group.
Wow.
At the end of the day, every single day. We did it for 40 days.
Okay.
Every single day. And so for me, doing that doing that audit honestly and acknowledging that I have actually not been doing very well, you know, in this particular area, and being vulnerable and saying, hey, I actually want to join this group. I didn't know who I was going to be within the group. I didn't know, you know, you could meet your colleague, you know, and you're thinking, okay, I thought we had everything, you know, sorted out. But just being honest in that space allowed me to, and meet people who are also struggling in the same space, you know, as you are juggling these other things I was talking about. And so doing that every day and having accountability, because it means you have to post every day. So it means I'm accountable to everybody in that group. Whether we are 250 of us in the WhatsApp group, I'm accountable to all of them. And you had to post and share. So every day you would come with a word, for example, rest or love. That's the lesson for the day. And you had to post a picture of you acknowledging that I have actually read, and this is this key verse for the day. And so for me, that's what the audit looks like. So acknowledging and saying that this is it, but also being accountable. So placing yourself in an accountability space. And for me, I think that's why fellowship comes in, because a fellowship space keeps you accountable. You know, people can ask you hard questions, you know, because one of the rules in the group was, if you do not participate, we shall give you grace period, but then we shall not have you in the group for a long time, because it means you're really not committed to this cause.
Yes.
And so that allowed me to be committed, and I have done that. This is now the 4th year?
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
since then.
Wow.
Yeah, so every beginning of the year, we do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
The challenge.
Yeah, the challenge, yeah.
SG, praise the name of the living God. we should join. I think we should. Is it for both men and women?
No, it's a ladies group. And then I forgot to mention.
Sorry.
Yeah, I forgot to Yeah, and I forgot to mention that beyond that, one of the things you are asked to write every year is to write 10 things you're trusting God for. So whether God answers them within that period, within that year, or not. But I can tell you for sure, I have actually seen several of those things being answered. So what does that do to me? Keeps me motivated. And I'm like, God actually responds. Yeah,
Wow.
God actually responds.
I
Yeah.
think I need to join because also me, I need to tap into
Yeah.
that favor. You know, I need to start seeing God there.
Yeah.
He's moving, yes, but you know,
Yes.
there's always glory to glory, you know.
We took a PP2 and
And
class
Aki, you know, I can't be crawling every day in this
Yes.
life, you know.
Yeah.
And I love that you've brought the aspect of there's after you're doing all this, at the end there's a fruit. There is something that you're looking towards. And so that gives us growth. So how has that been in your life, that growth? Has it been at some point you're like, hey God, kwani nagonga ukuta uski? You know, he says knock, ask, seek, you know, but you're feeling a little bit. So how has that
Yeah.
growth look? How has it looked like for you? And how can we also look forward to, you know, there's that fruit, there's that goal we need to look out for?
Well, I can honestly say it's not been smooth sailing. There have been seasons where you feel like God is really silent. But I think what I've found to be very helpful, and I don't know that that really answers the question in totality, is that the seed that you have planted over the years, that word that you had, that word that you read, that prayer that you made and God answered, even in seasons of difficulty, in the low moments especially, that's when it comes up. That's when you remember. You begin to remember, this is what God did for me. I can't remember where in the Bible, but I remember there's a place where God is Ebenezer, and it's a place of looking back. So
Yes.
having Ebenezer moments where you can say, God did this for me 3 years ago, or this word was spoken to me. And in those low moments, because it's not always smooth sailing, you know, consistency does not look like it's, you know, all a plain field and everything is great. You'll have really, really low moments. And I've had really, really, really low moments in my walk of faith. But when you're consistent, is that the word that you read and the prayer that you made or the word that you had in a space of fellowship or in a place of teaching always comes alive.
Yeah.
And that gives you the reassurance that God is still here. Even in this space, God is still here. You know, God is still with me, even when I'm having difficulty.
So the assurance that he is still there.
Yeah.
He is
That's
always
how
with
he's
me.
always with you. Ebenezer moments. I think today we have learned something. Isn't there Ebenezer
Yes.
moments? When those times you're low, you're like, hey, God. Like this week has been also one. Hey, it is one for the books. Just like how yours. But for some reason, I was at peace. You know, I was having this Ebenezer. God, say, prayed this prayer. Kwadi. But I'm really encouraged that there is those moments. And thank you for that. Thank you. Anything, karaoke?
Wow, I have learned a lot.
Yeah.
I'm taking it in as we're going because it's a lot. It's eye opening
True.
to the point that you see that even as you are plugged into the source, it's a multi-step process.
Yeah.
You have to evaluate yourself. You have to see, okay, I have made the decision that I am plugging myself into God. I want to continually seek Him. So you have to stop and ask yourself, what does that look like?
Yeah.
My life, does it reflect what is expected of me? So I hope I'm not distorting the message. Yeah.
No, you're on the right track.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe one final question is that as we continually plug into the source, what should we expect? As in, I know we expect to grow,
Yes.
but should we expect to see like a sign somewhere telling us turn left
Turn
next?
left.
You know, or
No
something.
zebra crossing here. I
Yeah,
know
what are the expectations?
Well, we talked about having expectant hearts, which is
Yes.
good. And so having an expectant heart, as I said, is going with the expectation into God's presence and dwelling in His presence, and going with the expectation that He will not only hear, but He will also respond. And the other one is that expect that God will reveal Himself to you. He will reveal His works. He will reveal His word. Instruction, you know, He will tell you, you know, this is the way you should go. He actually says, you know, I will counsel you with my loving eye on you. So it's assured that He will respond, But also the other thing to expect is transformation. Expect to grow in the fruit of the Spirit. Expect to have to be empowered by with the gifts of the Spirit, which I know is a topic on another whole level.
Yeah.
For them to be activated, and that comes as you grow in your intimacy with God. As you
Yeah.
grow in your intimacy with God, then that those things now begin to come alive, because at the end of the day, God desires that we glorify Him, not just in the way that we live, but also in serving Him. And the gifts of the Spirit is one of the ways that we serve Him and serve His people. And so the other one is a challenge of your character. So as you go into God's presence, expect that your character will be challenged, because as you
Yeah.
as he reveals who you are to you, as it says in Timothy, that God's word is not just about encouragement. It also rebukes you and reproaches you. And so are you ready for a transformation of your character, And God probably tells you, you have haughty eyes, or you're full of pride. So
When
are you
start saying
ready?
the
Expect
truth,
harsh
you're like,
criticism.
hey, God, does kidogo
Yeah.
punguza sauti.
So are you ready? Are you ready?
Yeah.
Because those are realities that happen. And so we have to be ready to be in that space where we accept correction as
Yeah.
it comes, as we consistently grow in our walk with God. And then the other one that we should expect is opposition from the enemy, because
Of course,
the reality
yes.
is he
Yeah.
doesn't want you to be fruitful. He doesn't want you to just have an experience of the treasures that are there in your growth and in your intimacy. As you grow in your intimacy with God, He doesn't want you to enjoy that.
Yes.
He's the enemy. I mean, he's the enemy.
Yes.
And so he doesn't want you to enjoy that. He has one job description: to kill, to steal, and to destroy. And so expect opposition from the enemy. But Jesus came that we may have life and have it in abundance. And so we know that as
Hallelujah.
long as we are on the side,
Yes.
or on Jesus' side, we know that we have life and have it in abundance. And so for me, those are the things that we should expect. And so I think for me, just to sum it up, is to say, be kind to yourself and be gracious to yourself. As long as you have made the audit and have decided to be consistent with your walk, the question is, you could easily have your 30 minutes, but your mind is not present. Your mind is not focused on God in that space. And so even when probably you've had a bad day, the day began not as you expected, and you had said, I need to be praying at 8 a.m. to 9 a.m., and the day probably didn't begin in a way that was possible. Make time somewhere before the end of the day and have your time with God, because that's what really matters, your time with God. And then expect that He will hear you and expect that He will respond.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's basically Holy Spirit activate.
And you have to be quality. It has to be quality
It has to be.
activation.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Miriam, for joining us. And just me by the way today, I'm like, hey, all this wisdom was just sitting. As in, thank you. Thank you, really. Thank you for my lovely co-host for joining us. I hope you guys have learned one or two things. Please, Holy Spirit, activate, in your life. Devote yourself to God. Stay consistent. Do a life audit. And just basically just throw yourself there. God is ready for you. He's going to receive you. And yeah.
Expect harsh criticism.
Yes. Musiogope. Thank you for joining us. Until next time.
See you.
Peace.